Hello and welcome to a review of Job Cost Work Centre plans. In this video I'll be having a look at work centre plans, essentially what are they for and how do they work. So first of all, work centre plans, what are they? The ability to control and monitor the flow of a job or project through stages or phases of a job. They tend to relate more to larger jobs, but certainly not exclusive to that use. You can have many work centre plans, giving flexibility while also retaining control. Stages or phases of a job can be closed while the job is still open, giving you much better control over what's going on. To save mispostings or miscodings of timesheets, invoices, etc. as the job moves through its stages. You can control which employees can post time and to what stage of the job. The ability to estimate a percentage complete more accurately, or to at least have a better view of what's going on in the job and where things are. The system can also help, can provide a percentage complete calculation for review purposes. Okay, let's have a look. Okay, so into Greentree. System, job cost, work centre plan maintenance. So we can come into here. Let's make that a bit bigger. Okay, in the standard demo system there's one set up. I've set up another one here, a standard construction. So the key here is the structure that resides over on the left hand side. What you'll notice is the structure has a more of a logical or process flow rather than an alphabetical order that is there. It's similar to setting up trees. So on here you have these ones that are finished self-explanatory. So you can create more as your hierarchy might grow. Again, you can have as many of these work centre plans as you like, and you can make them active and not active over here on the right hand side. You can also move them around, as you saw, move down and move up, etc. The idea would be that you do a bit of planning before you set them up. You can also load them up as well. I'll cover that shortly. The concept here is, as you read across, these are work centres. So when you're creating more, it's looking at my work centres, my standard job cost work centres, when I set them up. Remember, there's a free upload function to load those work centres up. So again, a bit of planning is worthwhile. So my construction job, I've got some preliminary and general costs, some on-site work and some maintenance afterwards, fairly simplistic. What you've got here is that it replicates my structure across here, and I decide how I want this work centre structure to work. I've then got a posting level, so this is where these are showing up and where they're posted to. These are, I guess, best described as summary levels. You'll see how these work in a second when we come to look at the jobs themselves. But purely you select the posting level there. So I could have multiple posting levels under those. This is quite straightforward and it has a simple one-for-one. You then have the option of all activities or an activity group. So you either have one or the other. So in other words, at a posting level, am I allowed to post to all activities, or am I a specific activity group? Probably about 8 or 9 times out of 10, you'll be selecting the activity group. Then I've got my employees. So the default is all employees, but then this is controlling the time that somebody is allowed to post to within that work centre. So for example, with my admin, I only want my admin staff being able to post time there. I don't want the people who are out on site posting time there by accident, or The usual case of maybe using it as a bit of a slush fund because nobody picks up on it. Enter the employees and you'll notice how the box change. You'll see I've got assigned and unassigned. I've also got my employee types that can be here as used as well. So just be careful with these because these work together. So I might take it out of one and not the other, then it'll be available. So in other words, for the straightforward example here, only Craig Clark and Chelsea Cork can post to this work centre. I'll show you how this works in a second. Coming across this default percentage complete, I will talk about this in a bit more detail and how it works, but those are the options there. Completion permissions. So in other words, when we complete a phase, which is what I mentioned on the original PowerPoint about one of the features here, I can control the only person who's allowed to complete the phase. Again, it's good admin and good housekeeping. You wouldn't want everybody to be able to close it off. By then closing it off, it means then it stops people posting to it, but the job still remains open. Okay, up here on the right hand side I've got the active, so whether the Workcenter plan is still active, and the limit activity code is selection. So what this means is, and this is generally set to true by default, is when I'm doing my transaction, it's checking it as I'm doing it. So in other words, as soon as I enter it, it's giving me the warning message. Let's show you what that means as an example. So a normal green tree, it's validating it by the time I come to do the save. That potentially is too cumbersome and too time consuming, especially when you've got a large job with lots of activities that you're coding up. So remember back here, I had Craig and Chelsea. I'm going to use Cameron Cook, who can't post to that, as an example. So again, Cameron, I get an error message straight away. So what that means is that limit activity at selection, as I'm selecting the job, and we'll come on to how the job is set up shortly, that is then controlling that error message. If that is set to false, it will let me key across there and give me an error message later on. The last bit there is that load from file, which is grayed out at the moment. If I was to start a new one, you can see that that load from file is highlighted. When I click on that, oops, when I click on that, it wants a source file, being a CSV file. In the help here, there's quite a bit of detail about what that source file needs to look like. Have a look through there, there's quite a bit of detail. Okay, now I'm going to move on to how the jobs are set up. Okay, so from the job itself, like anything, here's one I prepared earlier. So I have this job here. Okay, down the bottom there you now see this option, Use Workcenter Plan Maintenance. Some of you might know what this is, some of you may have seen it and wasn't aware. So when you change that, this label here changes. So if I untick it and tick it on, yep, and then you choose your Workcenter plan. Okay, then this tab here appears, Workcenters. Just before I go into that one, there is a module control setting in job cost module control, just to make you aware of this. So when you come in here in the defaults, you'll see this Use Workcenter Plan on Job. So this is the usual, the module control affects all of them. So when you see as I've come into the job itself, So the reality is that's probably fairly unlikely to be set, but it can be set. That option is there. When you come into the job itself, you're selecting what work centre plan is there. So again, you may have another job that doesn't have it, and that reverts to its standard activity group and has no work centres tab there. Just to note as well that on template maintenance, work centre plans there exist as well. So if you are using the CRM quote to job cost, that functionality is there, so your templates can still use work centre plans. Okay, this is my plan that's attached to this job. Here's my work centre tab. I'm just going to apply this, and let's just make the screen a bit bigger so we can talk about what's here. So you may recall on my work centre plan, sorry to be jumping around a bit, I had the concept of posting and what I called summary levels. So what you find now is that the summary level is bold. So my preliminary and general costs, my on-site costs, and my maintenance that I'll kick in later on, they're bold. This is totaling up whatever is in there. Just go back so we can have a look at that work centre plan. That's totaling up what's in there and giving me a grand total at the bottom. So it's given me a much better view than if you haven't seen this before, than looking on the transactions tab within job maintenance, which I'm sure most people have then used the clever table, taken that out to Excel, and then played around to give subtotals, filter, etc., etc. This then has some, I can expand out here, and these are my activities that have happened so far on these. Okay, just going across here, my scheduled start date. As you can see, this is editable. So I'm putting in what these dates are. My actual start date, I cannot change. This is when my first transaction came in against those activities. So I've had a transaction, be it an invoice, timesheet, whatever, come in there. That's my scheduled completion date. Again, that's editable. I can change that. And that's my actual completion date. That will get populated when I close it off, or when I complete this phase of the job. So again, now we're starting to talk about how we can complete the phase but still keep the rest of the job open. To complete the phase, I simply come in here and type 100%. That then closes that phase off. You'll see the effects of that in a second. So these are my estimated costs. My actual costs are my estimated costs again, coming from my estimates that are on my job. My actual costs, what the percentage is, etc., etc. across. The rest of these headings, pretty much standard job costing. My percentage completion method. Now you saw I've put these in here. I indicated initially when I was looking at my work centre plan, I can put them here. This has a filtering effect, so to speak, so I could set these up at the plan level, but I can also set them up here at an individual job level. I can change them. So you'll see when I go through the next step what this actually means, but I believe these are probably fairly self-explanatory as to what's going on. The cost, the hours, the cell, the elapsed time, so that's when these time schedules kick in, or none at all. The default, as you would have seen on that plan that I had set up initially, is none. So to take it down to its lowest level, I could have different percentage completion methods per line, just to confuse matters even more. Okay. Okay, so just to recap where we are, we have a job here that we've created. It's got a work centre plan on it. Some time and some invoices have come in against different phases. We can see by looking at this work centre tab, we can track our phases as to where things are. We can get a total at each phase as to what's going on, rather than looking at the transactions tab to dump everything out. So that's a better view of what's going on, and we can close those phases off as we need to. If you think of a larger job, we could have 10 and 20 phases, if not more, going on. We can monitor them a lot more. So what else can we do here? Because this is really looking at a job by job basis, which again, if it's a large company, is quite frankly going to be a pain. So under process, job cost, review work centres. So the look and feel of the screen won't come as any kind of great surprise. Your selection criteria here is probably quite key, as it is with any of these view type screens. I'm going to put in my job. No, first of all, I'll take that back. First of all, I'm going to look at all my work centre jobs. Okay, so these are jobs that I've got set up in my system here. The one we looked at was 5011. Now what you'll notice is the coloured one there, the 5012. That one is closed. Yeah, so I've marked it off as being complete. So no one can post to that. Let's make it a bit cleaner and just look at that job there. So what we've got now is we're looking at that one job that we were looking at earlier. It's showing those dates, it's showing all the costs, it's just showing them on one line, and it come across there. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to choose this for the moment, and I'm going to come over here and do my calculations. If I calculate, you notice here that the system, based on what I said my percentage complete method was, the system has therefore calculated it at 21.75%. Now whether that's accurate or not, who knows? The project manager or the job manager would probably have a better idea of what's come in and what hasn't, but that's what part of the process is. This is just the system applying its logic to it and saying, yeah, that's fine. I can clear them and think, yeah, okay, that's just giving me an idea, that's fine. If I copy my calculations and then save it, I come back into my job, I'm just going to refresh this. What you'll see is on that one there, it's pushed that 21.75% through to there. So that's what the copy calculations does. So again, depending on how you may work these, you may come into that review screen, have a tree by which certain jobs are done, or even by job manager or account manager, depending how you're using those fields, or even my job type, or even at a work centre level. Doing those calculations and pushing them through, and then the job manager, project manager, is looking at these on a job by job basis to see what's going on. Okay, there are some standard reports in the job cost management reports. You'll see them here. Work centre plan detail and work centre plan summary. I'm sure you can imagine what those reports look like, but they're standard reports that give you the basic information you need. Okay, I'd like to wrap up this work centre plan overview by just giving some tips. Most of them I mentioned along the way, but I just thought it's worth summarising them, even though some of them are probably fairly obvious. Okay, so the work centres must exist, but remember these can be uploaded, and there's a standard free free function that uploads those. Bit of planning up front would help for that. The Workcenter plans themselves can be uploaded. Remember, that was a CSV file. Have a look on the online help, you'll see it there. If a job has a Workcenter plan, then when completing the transaction entry, the rules on the Workcenter plan are adhered to. Further, if a stage is completed, then transactions cannot be edited or deleted. I guess that last one is quite important and worth making a note of. So in other words, if it's completed and you realise somebody's put some wrong time to the wrong activity, you can't go back and edit it, because that's part of the process of completing those stages. So just be aware of that. And I guess the first part of that point there, the transaction entry, the rules are adhered to. So in other words, it works across the system. Issuing stock to a job, doing timesheets, the mobile entry where the job is being transferred to, anything that touches those jobs across the whole system, the standard Greentree rules apply. It's recommended that estimates are added to jobs. That's to get those totals appearing correctly, as you saw on the Workcenter tab within the job maintenance. Okay, that concludes this session on Workcenter plans for job costing. I hope it's of some use, a bit of a reminder to people, and maybe for some people just a pointer as to where it is. It's part of standard job costing, so I hope it's of some use. Any questions, feel free to get in touch. Thanks.